Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya and the Museum Society of Mumbai, I extend a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today for the 9th Dr. Fredie Mehta and Mrs. Keti Mehta Memorial Lecture. Mrs. Keti Mehta was chairperson of the museum's Board of Trustees from 2011 to 2012, but was associated with the museum as a trustee for over 2 decades prior to that. She was a noted legal expert and had a distinguished career in practicing law. She dedicated herself to various social and educational causes. She was also a great humanist and a visionary. Dr. Fredie Mehta, after completing his doctorate at the London School of Economics, joined the Tata Administrative Services in 1956 and became the chief economic advisor to the Tata Organization in 1964. He was later promoted as a director of the parent body of the Tata Sons Private Limited at the age of just 42. He was associated with many institutions and organizations in this capacity over the years. In 1983, he was appointed by the then Governor of the Reserve Bank, Dr. Manmohan Singh, to be a member of the committee to review monetary policy. The 9th Dr. Fredie Mehta and Mrs. Keti Mehta Memorial Lecture is being delivered by renowned filmmaker, art historian, and photographer, Professor Benoy K Behl. Over the past 48 years, he has worked tirelessly in documenting Asian monuments and art heritage. He has taken over 53,000 photographs and made 146 documentaries that are regularly screened at major museums, universities, and cultural institutions worldwide. And these have also been nationally telecast on prime-time television in India. We are very fortunate that he will be sharing one such documentary with us today as part of his talk, Nalanda and the Indian Roots of Tibetan Buddhism, a documentary which in fact has won several awards at international film festivals. Professor Behl's work has been exhibited at 74 countries, and he has held the Limca Book Record for being the most traveled photographer and art historian. In January 2008, the National Geographic magazine carried an 18-page story about ancient Indian art revealed through his photography, and he is the first Indian to be featured by the magazine. BBC World News has also carried 3 major stories about his pioneering work in India and Vietnam. The vastness of Professor Benoy K Behl's documentation presents a wide and new perspective in understanding the art of India and Asia. His photography of ancient murals in remote places has clearly established the continuous tradition of painting in India from ancient times through to the medieval period. His book, The Ajanta Caves, published by Thames and Hudson, London, has been in continuous print since 1998, and the latest edition, printed in 2023, includes the digital restoration of the masterpieces of Ajanta carried out by Professor Behl. His recent books include The Art of India, Sculpture and Mural Painting in 2 volumes, Buddhism, the Path of Compassion on the Buddhist Heritage of the World, Hindu Deities Worshipped in Japan, Buddhist Heritage of Andhra Pradesh, Northern Frontiers of Buddhism, and Buddhist Heritage of Sri Lanka. The Arctic World Archive has selected 2 of Professor Behl's works to be preserved in the memory of mankind: an acclaimed photograph of an Ajanta painting and a digitally restored photograph of the earliest surviving Hindu painting at Badami Caves, a truly befitting way of honoring his legacy. It is my honor to now request Professor Behl to commence his talk.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Such a pleasure to be here with all of you. My many thanks to Mr. Sabyasachi Mukherjee for this very kind invitation to come and be with all of you. And my thanks to Dr. Saryu Doshi for having so kindly come from the Museum Society of Mumbai for this. Of course, it's a very special pleasure for me to be here at the museum again. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Mr. Sabyasachi Mukherjee for 34 years. It was so nice to recall those moments with him just a few minutes ago. It was absolutely wonderful. And what a great museum this is. It's a great living legacy which is doing so much for this society. It's a great pleasure. And I must also say that it's wonderful to be in Mumbai again. The people of Mumbai, I lived here for about 15 years, and ever since I left here, I've missed the people of Mumbai. There is a whole culture, there is an atmosphere. It's truly one of the greatest cities anywhere in the world. It's a living culture which is just wonderful. It is so good to be here. My many thanks to the Ministry of External Affairs, who very kindly sponsored the making of the film which you're going to see today. My grateful thanks to my colleague and wife Sujata Chatterjee, who makes it possible for me to do all that I do. And so today we're going to talk about a very wide-ranging subject, actually, something that should open us to looking more into our ancient past and looking for many things in that past which maybe we don't always look for or look at. The story of Indian philosophy is a long story of the constant search for the lasting truth beyond the passing shadows of the ephemeral world. And it is this ephemeral world, illusory world, which we call Maya or Mithya. The veils of this illusion need to be lifted so that we may see that which is more true, that which will last. And obviously, in such a tradition, it is not prayer that we depend upon. This is a matter of removing ignorance. So the answer is knowledge. So there has been this absolutely remarkable tradition of the search of knowledge in this subcontinent, something absolutely wonderful which needs to be looked at again and again. And sometimes you wonder whether in today's world we have this anything akin to the search for knowledge, or anything akin to the way in which that search for knowledge, the rigor, the truthfulness with which that search for knowledge used to be carried out in that ancient past. Now, the earliest way of searching for this knowledge was to search within, and it was through yoga or meditation that there was this very solitary tradition of going deep into oneself, going away from the noise and clamor of the material world to be able to see what may be beyond. The Buddhist tradition had a wonderful contribution because it brought the Sangha, the coming together of so many who got together and tried to find steps on this path towards enlightenment. Step by step, how to go about this seemingly very abstract idea of enlightenment, being able to see beyond the illusory world. How to create a path which would then work for all. And this led also to the coming together of many, many intellectuals at the founding of the first universities that we are aware of in the world. The Nalanda University is the one that stands out the most. But we must remember it was not only Nalanda. It was a consortium of universities. As a matter of fact, a very easy example to look at is that of Dipankar Srijana, Atisa, who studied at Nalanda and went on to complete his higher studies at a university in Indonesia, came back, and then he was teaching at the Vikramshila University, where he became very famous as a great teacher. And he was constantly invited, again and again invited, by the people of Tibet to come and reawaken the lost knowledge of Buddhism there. Eventually he took the invitation and he went, and that is why we know more about him, because the Tibetans owe a huge debt to him and worship him and constantly speak about him. So there was this marvelous consortium of universities. We know about Nalanda, we know about the very close by Udantpuri, we know about Vikramshila, which came up a little later. We know about the Paharpur University in what is now Bangladesh. We know about the Takshashila University. We know about the university at Balkh, now in Afghanistan. And what is very important here is that it was knowledge in all its forms. It was knowledge of the world, it was a science of the mind, it was a science of the heart. There were no clear barriers put in between philosophy and psychology. There was every kind of knowledge which was investigated. And there was a study of logic, because logic is so important for understanding anything at all. What is knowledge itself was studied, epistemology. And all this was studied with great rigor and with great vigor. And systems of study, systems of the writing of theses were well established. We find in Tibetan translation and Chinese translation, we find that there were these wonderfully worked out, marvelous treatises on so many subjects. And not only were these universities founded then, but the influence spread. If you look at the universities, for instance, the one at Balkh, which Sujata and I had the pleasure of visiting in war-torn Afghanistan. At places like that, the religion eventually changed. It was no longer Buddhism which was the inspiration, it became Islam. But the organization of the university, the manner of teaching, the systems which were set up, the ways of writing the theses, all that remained the same. And finally, when European visitors visited places like the university at Balkh, the ideas were transported. A university came up in Paris, they came up in other places, and we are in fact able to study this movement of ideas and this movement of systems because of some of the very formal structures of the theses being written at Nalanda. For instance, there was the discursive argument. When a thesis was presented, it was not just a matter of saying something and just pushing one's point, but the theses had A, B, C, D, E points laid out in support of what was being said, and then A, B, C, D, E, E, so many points laid out against that thesis. And then thereafter, there was, in a very formalized way, so many points laid out of supporting the point A, and then points laid out disproving or going against the point A. So in a very formalized structure, all this was very carefully laid out. Now, that authenticity, that rigor with which the truth was being sought and examined is something we could learn a lot from today. And we should look at these things. And it is this formalized structure and the movement of this formalized structure to the universities of Europe which helps us to identify the influence of these Buddhist universities to so many places. So we are going to take a look at this, and of course we are also going to be looking at how the people of Tibet help to preserve the traditions of Nalanda. And here at Nalanda and these universities, there was also a very important development of art which was taking place. The earlier ancient art was so beautiful, it was very personalized. It helped to melt our egos. We looked upon the art and we lost ourselves, and we responded, we were moved and we responded to that. Now here at Nalanda, the dynamic intellect had also come into play. The examination of so many points, the examination of it all, seeing it logically put together. And this reflected in more angular and sharp features which began to be displayed in the art. And this led to more abstraction in the art. So it spread from here, and you also began to see it later in the Jain manuscript paintings, and not only in the manuscript paintings but in the sculpture of Western India. All this spread. You begin to see this in Ladakh, you see it even in places like Myanmar, which were influenced by the Indic traditions. So it is a whole world which was changing, and this was the medieval idiom which came to be formed. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to present to you the Indian roots of Tibetan Buddhism, the Nalanda tradition. Thank you so much.
In 1991, I photographed the paintings of Ajanta, these 5th century paintings which are hidden in the darkness of caves in Western India. These are the most revered and the most beautiful paintings of the entire Buddhist tradition. In all the countries of Asia, they speak reverentially of this site. The paintings of Ajanta changed my life. The gentle beings of the art permeated my consciousness. Every time I looked at the paintings, I was carried away. There was an infinite warmth, humility and compassion in these paintings. It was expressed in every gesture, in every glance. It was indeed a world of compassion which took me over completely. A journey began to discover the philosophy, the vision of life which underlies these great paintings. Leading experts on Buddhist art said that my photographs showed the Ajanta paintings in their true and luminous colors for the first time. Universities, museums and cultural institutions from around the world invited me to come and lecture on these paintings. Everywhere, people responded with warmth to the sensitivity and compassion contained in the art of Ajanta. These are in fact the very qualities which people associate with Buddhism. However, many asked questions about current practices in Buddhism, particularly in the Himalayan regions, These appear to be rather different from the early compassionate faith. Was this Buddhism really? How did these changes come about? Join me on a journey through the history of Buddhism. Let us see how these transformations took place in Buddhist practice. Gautama Siddhartha was one of humanity's wisest teachers. He was born in 563 BCE, the son of Sudhodana, the ruler of the Shakya clan. Sudhodana ruled from the town of Kapila Vastu in the present-day state of Uttar Pradesh in India. At the age of 35, Gautama attained Bodhi, the knowledge of the eternal truth. Gautama Siddhartha taught a profound ethical message to the many followers who soon gathered around him. He spoke of the pain in our lives and pointed out that this was because of our own desires. The way to do away with the pain was to lose our desires. The majority of Buddhists belong to the earlier austere form of Theravada Buddhism. They believe that it is through self-discipline that they can give up worldly attachments to proceed on the path to salvation. There are also Mahayana Buddhists. They believe in Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are beings on their way to enlightenment who have delayed their own salvation to help others on the path. Besides self-discipline and personal development in order to lose our confusions and desires, we can also pray to them for their help. And then there are the Vajrayana Buddhists in the Himalayan regions of India, in Tibet, southern China, Mongolia and in Japan. They appear to follow colorful and magical practices. They seem to be very far from the concepts of Buddhism as we understand them. The Cham dance of the Lamas signifies the victory of knowledge over ignorance. In Buddhist thought, the greatest evil is the ego. It is that sense of the self which is the greatest illusion which we must lose in order to gain true knowledge. The masks cover the ordinary day-to-day nature of the men and present instead the qualities of the deities within them. There are peaceful masks and those with wrathful expressions. To understand the practices of the Lamas and to understand the history of later Buddhism, we have to turn to Nalanda and other universities of Eastern India. In the first millennium, great Buddhist monasteries were established in the plains of eastern India and in Kashmir. These were intellectual centers where the science of the mind was studied in great detail. The finest intellectuals analyzed the path, the steps on the path towards Buddhahood or true knowledge. They sought to create a logical path which would lead us step by step towards that knowledge, a path which would work for all. These vast universities had hundreds of teachers and students who came from across India and from the many countries of Asia that had embraced Buddhist philosophy. The greatest of these was here at Nalanda. Here there was a spirit of vibrant intellectual thought, a climate of discussion and debate.
One of the most important universities in the world was developed not in the medieval West, but right here in India. And here I'm referring to the university consortium of Nalanda, Vikramashila, Somapura, Odantapuri. All of these various universities were instrumental in producing people who were capable of understanding and articulating what it means to have universal knowledge, knowledge that's applicable across cultures and across times.
Something which is so unique of Nalanda University in terms of its knowledge and wisdom is the tremendous logic, tremendous metaphysics, and the tremendous study of epistemology, which are all utilized to bring about incredible depth of the warmth in the human being.
Buddhism and like Jainism, we have no sort of concept of creator. So one's own salvation must achieve through one's own effort. Now, the main obstacle about salvation is ignorance. There are many different levels of ignorance. So logically, the antidote of ignorance is knowledge, not prayer. And then also, you see, the basic Buddhist approach is from this level, without sort of waiting blessing, but one's own sort of effort, and step by step become Buddhahood. So therefore, in order to practice effectively, we have to know about mind, about emotion. So therefore, those Buddhist texts, also including some Hindu sort of tradition where practice of shamatha and vipassana there, naturally the explanation about mind automatically come. That part I consider science.
India has having the galaxy of scholars. These Nalanda, especially the Vikramshila University, was the many scholars. It is very difficult to pinpoint this is the scholar.
Nagarjuna has a very, a significant place in Buddhist philosophy. He has, as I see it, propounded the Madhyamika philosophy, which is the philosophy as demonstrated in the Prajnaparamita Sutra. Madhyamika is regarded to be the highest school of thought in Buddhism. So in understanding the reality of the external and internal world, it's very important that the philosophy of Madhyamika tells us that the entire world is interdependent, and they do not have any inherent existence, they do not have any essential existence, but they are interdependently originated.
Then in the case of Arunachal, so without such established monastic universities, very big established monastic universities, how come that one individual person can have such coherent, very precise, and able to articulate these concepts so beautifully? So how can that be possible? And then likewise, it is not just Arunachal, then Arunachal's student, Arideva, for example, his writing, 400 stanzas. So you look at that, there's such a richness. So from these, I got the idea that, at the time of Arunachal and Arideva, there already must have been existing such a big monastic, so well-established monastic universities with a rich tradition, with a long tradition of intellectual rigor and depth and sophistication. So from this, I would say that Nalanda University, which the history tells that it was at time the Arunachal, I would say that should go, even beyond Arunachal's time.
The high-altitude plateau of Tibet, lying to the north of India, received Buddhism in the 7th century. King Songtsen Gampo had 2 wives who both followed the path of the Buddha. One queen was from Nepal and the other was from China. This led him to take a deep interest in the Buddhist faith.
The most overwhelmingly impressive and inspirational thing for me about the Tibetan traditions of Buddhism as received from India is the way in which those great masters of the past went to such incredible lengths to not only go and get those teachings and bring them to Tibet, but the masters, the Indian masters who travelled, went through incredible hardships, and they were willing to put those lives on the line or even sacrifice those lives for the good or the benefit of this much greater vision in which the whole of humanity, particularly perhaps the Tibetan people in the case of bringing Buddhism to Tibet, but in a larger picture than that, the whole of humanity in preserving those traditions for the future, preserving the knowledge, the wisdom, the meditative practices, the Vajrayana, the tantric practices, all those things, that great treasure of understanding and capacity for human beings to enlighten themselves.
History says, Dunkars give the references, when the Buddhism in Tibet developed in 2 phases. One is early phase, other is later phase. First phase begins from 7th century to the end of the 9th century, means 842 something like that. In this period, from India, almost 51 scholars and the Pandits were invited. Then after second phase of development, it is said almost 121 Indian scholars visited Tibet. They have contributed. They have revised the text which was earlier been translated.
Tibet did not have a written script till the 7th century. The acceptance of the Buddhist faith entailed the understanding of subtle philosophic concepts and profound commentaries. This transfer of knowledge would not have been possible without translating and writing it down. A very sophisticated language and a script capable of preserving this knowledge had to be formulated.
Oh yes, Tibetan language or script is very much copy and very much similar because it's based on one of the ancient Indian script. Once Buddhism reached Tibet and started translation, then the vocabulary which in Buddhist tradition then translate into Tibetan, not available in Tibetan language, so created new words. So therefore, eventually, the Sanskrit vocabulary or Sanskrit terminology and Tibetan terminology go exactly the same.
So this language became potent enough to translate Sanskrit word into Tibetan in exactly in the same meaning and the same purpose.
It was in the 8th century that Acharya Shanta Rakshita of the Nalanda University was invited to Tibet to teach Buddhism. He brought with him a great system of monastic teaching, which was based upon a deep study of the principles of logic. He taught the Tibetans to focus on fundamental concepts such as what is our knowledge based upon? what is knowledge itself?
The Acharya Shantarachit, the first person who established Buddhism in Tibet, and he emphasized the Tibetan people to learn the Buddhism not by faith but by reasoning, by logician, and by analyzing the things for oneself, as Buddha had told, not to believe which has been said by Buddha, but to understand by oneself through analyzation and through a rational mind.
There were some practitioners, but there were no tradition of monkhood in Tibet, in Tibetan community. So Shantarakshit has greatest contribution in establishing the monastic community in Tibet.
So what he did was that while the richness, the main content of this whole legacy, which is in the form of philosophy, so that he started to impart by means of the logic. So he introduced logic there in Tibet. So with the study of logic, then you can't really escape. You can't really have room for diluting the concept. So the logic is like a very precise container. So with this container, you can see what is really there. The measurement is so accurate. So there, the philosophy, which is like the content of this the container of the logic, it was so freshly preserved in Tibet.
So I think Tibetan quite fond, use Nalanda name. So all Tibetan tradition, come from each different tradition. Their original sort of masters all come from Nalanda. So I usually describe Tibetan Buddhist tradition is a pure lineage of Nalanda tradition. So I also, start from age from 6, 7, already start memorizing these texts of Nalanda. At that time, I do not know who is the author of these texts and come from which sort of institution. I have no idea.
Atisha was another great teacher who was persuaded to go to Tibet in the 11th century. He had studied at Nalanda and was a teacher at the Vikramshila University, also in Bihar. He helped to make the philosophy understandable to common Tibetans.
Perhaps his unique genius was to be able to take all of this very esoteric information and condense it into a form that could be understood and used by anyone. Another very interesting aspect of universal knowledge is that it can be condensed and transported. Atisha was also instrumental in the condensation of this knowledge so that it could be taken out of the university context, perhaps transported into another culture, and then take root. And this is one of the things that happened in Tibet in the 11th century.
He was amazingly learned, and his signature kind of text, the light to the path, the lamp to the path to enlightenment. This text formed the basis for the later school of the Gelugpas under Tsongkhapa, and formed the basis for the gradual path to enlightenment, the Lamrim, that became the signature of that school. This particular path, became of such huge importance in Tibet, and yet Atisha was one master of many in India. And I think perhaps when you consider that lineage of masters that came, you can say that they must have represented a very small number of those who were in existence in India at the time. And yet those masters in Tibet now, whose works have continued, have been preserved there in a way in which Indian Buddhism wasn't preserved in India. And so in that sense, the Tibetans have played a hugely important role for for the planet if you consider these teachings of great value.
We know about a few of the great teachers of the Nalanda University owing to the writings of the Tibetans. What a place Nalanda must have been, and what a great society it must have been out of which all this was born. A society which gave so much importance to rational thinking and the logical search for knowledge. Truly an intellectual society.
Nalanda may have produced thousands of great scholars throughout the time. His Holiness Dalai Lama has enlisted 17 kind of leading outstanding scholars of Nalanda monastery throughout the time, and he composed a prayer to all those 17 outstanding scholars.
The universities of the plains of Bihar in medieval India had to have been incredible places to be at the time. When you think about the thousands and thousands of monks and scholars that were concerned with the most important things every day, year in and year out, we must understand that there was something incredibly special going on here. This was not a pastime. These were the most important aspects of human experience that were being developed, concentrated on for the good of humanity. Imagine something like that. Here in the modern world, we're used to thinking of everything as being marketing-driven and money-driven. This instead is being driven by the evolution of consciousness, the growth of consciousness, the growth of compassion.
I think since Buddhism flourished in Tibet, whole Tibetan way of life changed. Buddha come from India. So therefore, we Tibetan, look India as something Arya Bhumi, a very sacred sort of land. Tibetan, then you should consider such Tibetan who once went to India, some study and speak Sanskrit or Pali, and they have a little bit sort of higher status. India, sacred land. Anything from India is something very sacred, very holy.
The monasteries re-established in South India are of the larger monastic institutions in Tibet, and they continue the traditional study of the all Tripitaka through its commentaries.
Buddha himself, they advise us, "O my follower, bhikshus and scholars should not accept my teaching out of faith and devotion, but rather through thorough investigation and experiment." So that way of approach is, I think, very suitable in modern time. And the scientific-minded people, loves that kind of way of approach. So perhaps I think in modern time, people who not easily sort of accept things, rather through investigation, experiment. So such people finds Buddhist way of approach is more realistic, more practical.
In the Indic civilizations, I think one could go much wider and much deeper. You could ask questions: why are we here? What is the nature of God? What is the nature of the self? What is the purpose of human existence? These things are the subject of great dialogues. It's much closer to the Socratic dialogues. The Socratic Plato dialogues are very much of the same pattern as the Indic dialogues.
So this knowledge is a pure knowledge. It has nothing to do with dogma. It has nothing to do with, a religion as such. So therefore, I call it as a legacy of India, the legacy of the world. So it must not disappear. It must remain for long.
India is an extraordinary country. Mother India, really, Mother India. India is one of the most religious, wrong word, the most spiritual countries on earth, because Indian people have a very deep understanding of the spiritual life.
In the history of human civilization, India has been one of the great originators of culture and religion. Indian culture has done for the East what the Greek and Roman culture together did for the West. And therefore you will find all the way from Afghanistan to Indonesia and all the way to Japan and China and Korea and all the countries of South and Southeast Asia has the impact of Indian culture on their language, on their customs, on their art, on their music. It has been an extraordinary saga.
One of the great miracles in the story of man is the spread of ideas across formidable natural barriers of high mountains and vast seas. Ideas do not know political and national boundaries. The ready acceptance of the ideas of life by the people of faraway lands underlies the sameness of human life and the human condition everywhere. Perhaps the greatest example of the travel of ideas is the vast spread of the Indic concepts of Buddhism and Hinduism in ancient times. These ideas were warmly accepted wherever they went. From Sri Lanka in the south to Mongolia in the north, from the river Volga in the west to Japan in the east. This spread was not through military conquests, but simply through Indian traders. The people who heard them talking about philosophical matters wished to know more. Here was a philosophic vision which appeared to bring peace and happiness in one's life. Therefore, Indian teachers were cherished and sought.
So therefore, I always describe, or when I met Indian, I always say, you are traditionally our guru. We are Chela. You Indian are our guru. Then also I mentioned, we Tibetan, not only Indian gurus Chela, but also quite reliable Chela. That means in guru's own land, Buddha Dharma, a lot of ups and downs. During this period, we, your Chela, kept throughout, you see, through centuries, we kept your knowledge intact. So we are quite a reliable Chela. So our relation is something very unique, Guru and Chela.